Good morning and welcome everyone to our monthly national webinar. I'm Dipalsha Magruder, the founder of Mob United, and we are so excited to be getting started for this season. As you may know, we've been on break, on a hiatus since the summer, and I just want to thank everyone again who showed up and participated in our Mobiversary activities over the summer. We had a robust lineup of programming on a whole host of topics centered around the organizational pillars over the summer, as we were and are celebrating 5 years of Mob United. It's really hard to believe that we've been at this for 5 years. And we just thank all of you who've been with us on this journey for your ongoing support and participation. So this morning, we're ready to talk about a topic that is on so many people's minds this morning as parents, which is returning to school. And whether your child is starting daycare or preschool or going off to college, this will be a relevant conversation for you because we all have many of the same anxieties around, there's always a lot of, I would say, anxiety around the return to school period. It's always certainly my most stressful time of the year, no matter what. But when you layer on, we are now in, I was thinking about this, really the third school year that's being impacted by a pandemic, which is just shocking. It's hard to believe that this has been now. I remember it was the end of, second grade for my youngest son. The second half of second grade went to remote. Then the entire third grade and seventh grade for them were in and out of school. And now we're going into another year where we're still dealing with the pandemic, masks, vaccines, maybe needing to quarantine and shut down at a moment's notice, people getting COVID, and it's a lot to navigate. So that's why we titled this session The New Abnormal, because I think we've all had this hope an expectation that one day this is just going to be over and we're going to go back to life as normal. We're going to go back to the life we knew. One day there will be an end date. When is that? So we can just return. We can take off these masks. We don't have to worry about getting sick. We don't have to see so many people dying. We don't have to shut down schools. And then we can just resume life as we knew it. And I and many people are starting to believe and see that we are probably not going back to that life. This is the new abnormal, and it's something we're going to have to live with for a while, for the foreseeable future, if not forever, and how to navigate this. So we need to equip ourselves with what we need to be able to do that and to navigate uncertainty. So we have two very special guests and speakers who are going to help us sort through this. They have a lot of expertise and experience. So I'm going to introduce them and then turn the conversation over to them. And as they're speaking, we encourage you to make comments, ask questions. Kamari Gapoor Davis, who is here with us. She's the head of Mob United's education and engagement area. And she is also an educational consultant who owns a company called Optimistic Expectations. So she's also well-positioned to speak to these issues, and you've heard from her before. But first, I want to introduce our two guest speakers. The first is Sharon Green, who I have known for a few years. We met serendipitously at a TV shoot actually a few years ago and have been connected in different ways since and recently reunited. So let me tell you a little bit about Sharon. Sharon Green has developed a unique insight into the challenges that families face with the education of their children, inspired by her own 12-year personal journey as a homeschool parent to 3 African-American sons. So she's a mob times 3. Sharon has developed unique insight into the challenges that families face with the education of her children. She received her bachelor's in English literature from Spelman College. Shout out to Spelman. I have a lot of Spelmanites. I'm from Atlanta. She's an academic consultant and the founder of Bloomtree Coaching and Consulting Services, where she continues to cultivate cutting-edge approaches on how to educate, enrich, and elevate the whole child. As a scholastic champion advisor for African-American youth who are all too often overlooked and undervalued, Sharon is dedicated to giving clients the support and information they need to choose the educational setting that best fits their students' academic, social, and emotional needs wherever they are in their lives. As a family coach specializing in academic consulting and parent and life coaching, Sharon takes pleasure in helping others identify their goals and developing effective strategies to achieve them. So that sounds like a lot of things that we talk about a lot here at Mob United, a lot of information we can use. So we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for being here, Sharon.
Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce Cydne Smith Nash. Cydne Smith Nash has a lot of letters, LMSW, MSD, social worker, licensed social worker, I believe, is what all the letters add up to, and many more. She's an educator, social worker with more than 30 years professional experience working in K through 12, higher education, as well as nonprofit organizations. Her specialties include teens and young adults, family systems, adoption, and homeschooling. Further, Cydne is a certified trauma specialist who is adept at working with foster and adoptive families. She also is an experienced homeschooler who successfully helped her son transition from homeschool to public high school to college, where he is currently a sophomore. And throughout the years, Cydne has taught other homeschool children and worked as a private tutor. In addition to working with young people and their families, she's masterful at systems level nonprofit work, specializing in fund development, particularly grants and special project funding. We need to talk after this call, Cydne. She's raised millions of dollars for colleges and universities and nonprofits. Presently, she's the director of grants and special projects at our National Higher Education Association. Cydne has a master's of social work from the University of Southern California and a master's of science and education from Georgia State University and a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Missouri. Just to say, my husband went to law school at USC and my mom went to grad school at Georgia State. So a lot of connections there. And aside from her professional work, Cydne is passionate about her community. She currently serves as an advisory neighborhood commissioner, a local elected position in Washington, D.C. Wow, we just had a session over the summer about getting engaged in your local community and considering running for office. So feel free to throw that in too. And she lives with her husband of 31 years, her son, when he's home from college, and her dog, Mozart. So thank you both so much for being here. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to share, the wealth of both professional knowledge and expertise you have, as well as your personal experiences. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, mainly because I get to be in the audience and, just look forward to hearing you all be in conversation, sharing whatever you want to pour into our moms and broader audience. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Sharon and I are really excited to be here and to share with everyone. Just a little bit of background before we have our chat. We've been friends for over 30 years. We actually met through my husband when we were working, and the two of us just took off from there. We've done life together for a very long time, raised our sons together, and we have really interesting and deep conversations, probably on a daily basis, sometimes 2 and 3 times a day, depending on what's going on. So we just want to share with you a little peek into our conversations. And so we hope everyone can benefit and take just a bit of knowledge from what we have to share today. So Sharon, good morning. It is nice to see you. We haven't talked in about 12 hours. So sometimes that's a long time. As we've been doing life in the pandemic, we've figured out a lot of things, and there are a lot of things we still don't know. Let me ask you truly and really, Sharon, how is your life during the pandemic? Even though I know this because I talk to you every day, tell me like some really insightful things or what you've been doing for yourself during the pandemic, because even though we talk a lot, I'm sure there's some things that you just forget to tell me.
I don't forget to tell you, but I do want to say before I jump into that part, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, is that what you're getting a glimpse of is our friendship, right? Our love ship. And it's important, especially during this pandemic, that we have connection with people. And so Cydne and I not only chat on the phone, but we FaceTime. See, that's another level of how are you doing? Let me see your eyes. And so actually, if I get a phone call, it's more alarming to me than if I get a FaceTime, because that means that I have something to say to you quickly, and I might need you to do something. And so during this pandemic, it's even heightened the importance of being able to check in, because we're not able to physically see each other, flying to DC or coming to Atlanta due to wanting to stay safe. And so FaceTime, Google Chat, be intrusive in your relationships right now, because during this time, connection, what we have learned is so critical. And so how am I doing during this pandemic? Um, I'm doing. Most days I'm doing. I am a mother of three sons, and one he's allowed me to share has bipolar disorder, and so he's currently living with me. And during this time of isolation, he is. I have created a safe space for him, but I've also had to learn to have boundaries as well. How do you have boundaries within a home, and then you're contained, and then you have to wear this thing, right? Sometimes inside, right? And then having young adult children. And so I've had to make some decisions, Cydne, and you and I have talked about it. If that our children have made decisions to go out and hang out, that they might not be able to stay with me. I am someone who has underlying issues. I'm a breast cancer survivor, and so my immune system is compromised. And it's been hard to have those conversations with my sons and my nephew. And during that time, it was hard to say, you can't be here, right?
What do you mean during that time? Because it's not over, right?
No, it's not. It's not over. And I just had to have that conversation again. Remember, I came to you and I was like, girl, my nephew is now living with me. And he keeps going in and out. And you were
So
like,
what? Yeah. And I was like, that can't happen.
he can't be here, and I'm like, oh, but he should stay with me. And you were like, girl, mm-mm. And so I had that hard conversation, and I said to him, I'm not trying to change your behavior, your lifestyle, but in order to stay here, you can't move. And so my son, he doesn't leave. If he goes out with me, and I can see his movements. And my nephew decided to leave, and that was hard, but it was important for me to stand a healthy boundaries.
And so if he doesn't leave, then that's pretty isolating for a young adult. Like, how does that work?
So we've been having
I
some.
don't think I realized that he wasn't going anywhere.
No, he's not. He's not. He goes with me. So we have a date. We've been dating. And so he and I are going to the museum on Sunday, masked up. Uh,
Mhm.
we have gone to other social events, but he and I are
Mhm.
together, and I can see who is around, and we social distance. Um, but yeah, he was with his brothers. Remember, he went to back to Boston to his other
Right,
brothers
right.
for a few times. And so we've just been kind of watching TV, chit chatting on the phone. It's been hard, but we've been doing it. So how
Wow,
have you been in
that
this?
is a.
You've taken a more hard press than I have with this pandemic.
What do you mean?
How have you been doing in the pandemic? We've been talking back and forth about
Well, yeah,
this.
yeah. I guess you would say it's a hard press. I don't know. I just been trying to stay safe, and so I limited my travel greatly, um, and tried to stay away from people. Which is why I said he doesn't go anywhere. That was hard for me, and I'm old, and that was hard for me to stay home. So I can't imagine for a young person. Um, it was difficult, as you know. Our son was going off to college last year, and that came to a screeching halt, really. His institution decided to try something different, and they had 3 full semesters when they usually only have 2, so they could reduce the density on campus. And they decided that the freshmen would go in the spring of 21 and the summer of 21,
Mhm.
and kind of they got like a gap semester, if you will. And so he was home with us for that whole semester, and we were hunkered down, but it was great to have that extra time. We, really strengthened our family bonds if they could get any stronger, because they were pretty strong initially anyway. And but it was hard. It was hard for an 18-year-old who missed prom, who missed graduation. I mean, you have a son the same age, and it was just really difficult. But we did reach into it and use that time, to my husband and I especially to start parenting in a different way to a young adult, as opposed to, this child that we thought was still our baby. So the roles kind of changed a little bit. And then he transitioned to school in a pandemic. And that was really different. All of our hopes and dreams about what moving on to campus as a freshman would look like were pretty much dashed because parents weren't even allowed in the dorm.
Wow.
At that time. And so he had to go in and set up pretty much on his own. I think we were able to help him literally put the stuff down in his room. I think they did eventually allow us to do that. And then we left. And, we could, at that point, we were even afraid to hug. It was surreal.
Yeah.
It was really surreal. But we made it through, and, they transitioned to a different setting for this coming fall, and it's working.
So, one of the things that I noted was with behaviors, and we're going to be covering all age groups, but, since we're in the young adult stage,
yeah,
one of the things that I kind of had to grapple with was the whole notion of the COVID testing, right? And while I wanted my young adult sons to enjoy some semblance of activities, one of the things that I did institute is that if they traveled or if they went to a large concert, was that they were to get tested on a regular basis, even though they were vaccinated.
Vaccinated after a certain point, though.
After a certain point. So even after the vaccination, I was like, look, you gotta do this. My nephew has decided not to be vaccinated, and I still allowed him to be with me for a period of time. But we said, I just made him go and get COVID tested, and he was fine with it. What I've noticed with these young adults is that if it's an ask, right? They don't know what they don't know. And a lot of times we project what we think they're going to respond, or if they respond in a way that we're not necessarily sure how to, that we're reactive. And so I didn't know how he was going to respond, right? And then I was like, are you going to get vaccinated? And he gave me all this conversation about it. And I said, okay. I said, well, keep your mask on. And then also, please, will you get COVID tested? And he was like, fine.
Yeah, I don't think, it's been my experience that the young people don't mind getting tested.
No.
At our son's school, testing before the vaccines was every 3 days. They just went and got tested. As a matter of fact, when he got home, he said, it feels weird not to be tested. Not to be tested so often. And he just wanted us to keep taking him to get testing, right. To get tested. It's like, no, I need to know. I want to know what my status is. So I think we, make probably a bigger deal out of that
right.
than some of the younger people do.
Right. And so that's a great segue. So how has it affected you as your role as a parent? I mean, we kind of talked about that a little bit, but more.
Well, the whole thing is we all have to manage our own expectations, and that has shifted in this. So a lot of things, like I said, shifted for us. Our son graduated from high school. He's 18. We were navigating that, and then you overlay the pandemic, and role as a parent really shifts. I mean, automatically when there's a crisis, you want to protect your children. But recognizing that he's now moving into adulthood, and by some segments of society, consider him an adult, that was like really hard. Like, what do I do with that? Like, I can't tell him to do anything anymore, and partly I can't because some aspects of life, like I said, they don't even allow me. We had a joint bank account. Well, we had an account that, I don't know, one of these accounts for kids, and then he grew up and wasn't a kid anymore. And I went to do something on the account, and they said I couldn't do it. He was 18. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? So those kind of things happen in the pandemic. So I'm trying to keep him safe. And yet there's some things I'm not even allowed to do.
Right.
So that has changed. It's, I think, taught both of us that, it's taught both of us that he's not a kid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to quickly do a lot of things on his own. There was a problem with his dorm room, or not dorm room, but there was a problem when he first got to school on campus, and he couldn't stay in his assigned room. And so he and his suite mates had to figure out how to make all that work on their own.
Right.
Because mom and dad couldn't even, none of the offices were even open. And I think we even tried to call and do something. They were like, I think your child needs to do that.
Right.
So, things have changed. They've changed a lot. And you add the pandemic, and we have to recognize, and I say this all the time, we are in a pandemic.
We are in it. How about
we
like
are in
now?
It. Like people say post-pandemic, right? I'm like, what is post-pandemic? I don't know what that looks like, because we're not there yet.
Right.
We are in a pandemic.
Absolutely.
And so I keep saying that over and over and over to remind myself half the time that we are in a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And we've never been here. I mean, I don't know anybody alive that's been here that truly remembers it. Like,
right.
Even if they were alive last time we had a pandemic, they were 2, 3 years, 4 years old. They don't remember that. And so none of us on this earth have been in this situation to make any decisions about it.
Right.
And so it's different. So it means we have to react differently. We can't do the same things. I just love this title they had for us, The New Abnormal.
Right.
Because it's different, and it's not, we're never going to be the same. Why would we want to be the same? Half of that stuff we were doing was messed up anyway.
So one of the things that I really wanted to say as a parent, now I know that there are probably quite a few parents out there who are homeschooling or schooling at home, and Cydne and I,
which are two different things.
Which are two different things that we gonna check.
Two different things.
We'll check in a minute, because that whole notion of when the pandemic hit and everybody talking about I'm homeschooling.
Right?
Not really. You ain't homeschooling. You schooling at home.
You schooling at home.
Because you still got a teacher. You got
a teacher. Right, exactly.
Curriculum is given to you. What you're seeing is the character. So all of a sudden it's like, ooh, parenting 101. It's, shame. Like, my child really shows up like that. But homeschooling,
that's a whole
you are
different.
Dealing with that on a whole. So, I homeschooled, 12, 14 years?
Yeah, something like a long time.
So let me tell y'all.
And I homeschooled. Why? Because
I made you. Like, girl, you got to get in this with me. Like if I'm a misery, what? And the joy of.
Right.
Like, no. Right. But Cydne, I am so thankful I ain't homeschooling during this pandemic. I'm gonna just keep it very real. But in my professional way, we'll come to that a little later.
It's hard enough, right. It's hard enough. And
I can't even imagine.
But I mean, people can do it. You can do it, but just know that it's not the same as what it looked like before. Right. I'm gonna say it again. We in a pandemic, y'all.
We in a pandemic, and so as we're looking at, what do we do to help manage our children's expectations? How about we just let them lead? Those little people.
Yeah, the little ones can lead.
The
Absolutely.
2-year-olds, the 3-year-olds, they got this because they're raw with it, right? And so you're all in, okay, we need to have order. And they're like, no, I feel like doing this. And so what I think is so beautiful about the pandemic is that it's allowed us to really prioritize what's really important.
Yeah, I hope so. I know I've heard that.
That's why we still
from a lot of different people, right? And I hope it has, and I know it has for many families. It's allowed them to rethink their priorities, to rethink how they do things, to evaluate their relationships with each other in their, immediate households as well as outside. but it's tough. And I don't want anybody to think it's not.
Yeah.
I want people to honor that and to say, it's hard. It's hard. I'm struggling. This is, you can even say, this is not what I signed up for.
And be honest and truthful about that.
Absolutely. With yourself. You can say, this is not what I signed up for, but it's what you got.
Roll your sleeve.
So you got to then figure out what to do with it. And one of those ways is to manage your expectations. I'm a big believer in children being the leader. Our son has led our lives his entire life. And I don't want people to think that means I just let the child go crazy and just, run amok. No, It didn't look like that. But there's this funny story my mom likes to say all the time. I remember the one day you told me he just played in water all day. And he was probably 5 or 6 years old. So somebody probably thought he should have been, with some flashcards somewhere. But he played in water all day. When I say all day, that baby played all day.
Absolutely.
Standing on a chair at the sink because he wasn't even tall enough to do it. And it didn't occur to me to go to the bathroom. Well, one, it didn't occur to me because I didn't want to sit in the bathroom all day.
Right.
But the other part is, go ahead.
No, the other thing I was thinking is that this pandemic has allowed us not to take ourselves so seriously, right? So we're Zooming in these business meetings, and your kid goes, I gotta go to the bathroom,
Right.
Or I'm hungry, give me my food, right? But you're sitting there starving anyway because you want to be professional in your meeting and you hungry. And then this kid just comes and tells you, it's time to eat. Whatever you think is important is my belly is hungry. And what has been so wonderful is that you see even on CNN right now, Cydne, that people got their kids. Now there's like, come on, just get in the lap. Because
absolutely.
I can't. And I think if we normalize that, then we really normalize the compassion, the love of what our children are trying to say, that, finding the calm in this when it's unplanned, things open and your feelings, you feel totally out of control. Guess what? It's normal. It's normal, Cydne. And you and I do that all the time. That we don't manage the chaos. We just let the chaos present itself and take a deep breath, right?
Absolutely.
I breathe all the time. The other day when you sent me the text to say, are you okay? I had no idea what you were talking about. But then after we talked, you had seen something alarming on Instagram. I was already aware of it, but I was in mind. Okay, take a breath. So I was already doing what I did. But, the check-in piece on allowing our children to be center. So does that mean we give up control? Absolutely.
Right. It sure does. And that's a part too of us managing our expectations. Our children are not mini me's. I hear that so much. Oh, that's my mini me. No, that's not your mini me. That child that you are raising, however they came to you through birth or adoption, surrogacy, however they have come to you, they're not your mini me. They are a human being, all of their own. And they have their own expectations of themselves, even when they're little. They have their own goals and dreams, even when they're 4 years old. It's when our son decided he wanted to take dance, ballet. And we were like, what, really? At 4? And he would not let it go. That turned into an 8-year journey that the 4-year-old led us on. Right. Performances and all in, national places like the Kennedy Center.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, a lot of people forget, but that was our life for so long. Right. Then he switched off. Well, at the same time he had piano, but then he totally switched off to piano. But you have to let them lead and honor, just because they are little people or younger people, it doesn't mean they don't have their own goals and dreams and expectations. And we should not squash that with our overlaying our own dreams and expectations. We should foster that.
Absolutely.
And so the same goes with, children as they're returning to school. Find out, I keep telling parents, find out what the dreams are that your kids have.
Right.
Like even in returning to school, what is it that they want most out of school? Absolutely. That may have changed. If they were in the second grade when this pandemic started, now they're in the fourth grade. Mm-hmm. They're coming to the table with a whole different set of skills, which means they have a whole different set of expectations. Somebody that wanted to be a doctor before the pandemic started, they may want to be a firefighter right now.
Right.
They may want to, somebody that wanted to be a librarian may want to be a doctor now. So right. Because they've seen, what doctors have done throughout this pandemic. So honor, their expectations.
How about they might not want to know what they might not want to do anything. They probably have said, you adults have really messed this up. And then they can get defiant, right? I'm not listening to you. Look what you've done to me, especially young adults. I remember for those of us who have sandwich, remember this, Cydne? My mother has dementia. I have another son who has bipolar, and then I have two other sons and myself, we're probably the ones that are not sane, right? The other two are perfectly fine. But I was in this meeting. Remember, I think I told you I was in this meeting on Zoom. It was 8:00. My mother is like getting dressed and ready to go outside. Mm-hmm. And she is on a journey to go get something to eat. And then your nephew, you say you forgot to add a Hyundai to your list of living since he's in DC. And I run to him and I'm like, please just help me out. Mm-hmm. She can't go out. It's the pandemic. It's dark outside. She has dementia. I'm on a meet and I'm going down the list and I'm panicking. I throw him my credit card and she is on her way out the door. And all he says to her is that a good idea? And I'm like, come on, bro. Couldn't you say something better? Like, don't walk out. So she looks back.
I go with you.
I'll go with you. Now, because he was like, nah, it's dark outside and it's a pandemic. I'm like,
I'll go with you.
Right. So then she looks back at him and sits down. And about 30 minutes later, I hear the door knock and it's Uber Eats and they're eating wings. And I run out like, wings? Why are you eating wings? Why can't you eat? And then I was like, why are you trying to control the narrative? Like,
right. Yeah. Why are you trying to control that? I didn't hear that story. Why are you trying to? What?
And I'm like,
the fact that he fed her was good.
And she was happy with her grandson eating wings. And you know what? I went back to my meeting and probably said some things based on, why are you trying to control this? And what I've learned is that let our children lead no matter what age they are, because you're going to learn something. But the other piece too, Cydne, is now, what conversations should parents have with teachers, administrators, as our kids go back to school? Now, the kids we said.
Well, right. Well, first of all, we have to recognize that all of us are in this pandemic. Mm-hmm. So the teachers, they're just as stressed out as we are, because while there are kids' teachers, they also have families and friends, and many of them have had COVID, or their families and friends have gotten terribly sick or died from COVID. So everybody is stressed out, everybody. Mm-hmm. And so we have to recognize that. Again, nobody alive right now has been through this before. And so the administrators are trying to figure it out.
Right.
And they have made and they will make a lot of mistakes. Mm-hmm. But just as I always say that we need to provide ourselves grace, we need to provide the teachers and the administrators with some grace. Now, that doesn't mean just, you don't have any involvement. But don't be so harsh in automatically just stepping out and condemning what the decisions that they've made. Be a part of the decision making if you can. Try to get yourself at the table. And the other thing is, you can, as a parent, you have total control over what happens with your child.
Right. So what
And
happens when a
so,
child wakes up and doesn't want to go to school, and you want the child to go to school? What and how do you talk to administrators? How do we do
so yeah, so
here?
when, I've been in that situation. My child didn't want to go to school a whole lot of days. um,
Pre-pandemic.
Look, right, pre-pandemic. Some days he didn't want to go to homeschool, so
Right, right, right.
But what I would always do is, one, hopefully your child, so when they say I don't want to go to school, you should have an idea of why they don't want to go to school, and if you don't, just ask them why and try to understand the reasons. It could be anything as simple as change from home to school is difficult for that child. And so then you can think of routines to help them navigate the transition from home to school. That might be a lot for some kids. It could be that they feel intimidated by other children. And so you need to figure out, if that's the cause, what to do about that. It could be that they really don't feel well that day.
Right.
And so they need to, and don't feel well could mean they need a mental health break, not just a physical, I don't feel well. They just, some days, I mean, we all know what that feels like. We wake up and we feel like, oh, and I'll be honest with you, if it's not anything important on my schedule, I'm taking the day.
Right. And we need
Because
to
I
honor
need
that
it.
for children too.
Absolutely. We have to honor that. So, and after you can kind of figure that out, now everybody doesn't have the luxury to sit and talk to their 10-year-old for 2 hours at home in the morning to figure out why you don't want to go to school. So you might have to assess it pretty quickly, but then if you can, have a conversation with the teacher and let them know so-and-so isn't quite themselves today. And so, could you keep an eye out to see what might be going on? Or I just wanted to let you know. That goes a long way. And if you can't do it at the school door right now, there really a lot of restrictions on who comes in schools, how kids are dropped off. Send an email.
Right.
And I used to get in the habit of not only sending the email to the teacher, but I would CC like the school social worker or the school counselor, just to make sure that there are enough support systems in place.
Right.
And I would do that if my child woke up and said, I really don't want to go to school today. And if it's just, oh, I'm tired because I stayed up too late, particularly if they're in high school, that's one thing. But if I couldn't put my finger on it and they couldn't put their finger on it, then I sent a note to the social worker and said, he's really not feeling it today. Could you just check in on him? Or
Right.
send a note to the teacher and say, he's not feeling it today. Just know that things may not go as planned, or things may be a little off. So I just encourage parents to keep in contact with the teachers and administrators and advocate for your child, even while you're letting your child leave.
Right. So one of the things, there's 2 points that I wanted to share with you, Cydne, that I've been dealing with in the last couple of days or weeks, actually, is the transition from middle school to high school, especially for ninth graders, right? Because what has been coming to my attention is that they haven't been in school since 7th grade, right?
Right.
So they didn't have any normalization of being the big kid on the block in 8th grade in middle
Right.
school. And now they're thrusted into 9th grade. And so there's this fight or flight kind of thing going on. So there's been a lot of aggression in schools. And the counselors are like, hold up, wait a minute. And it's been really hard for the boys and girls to manage how to operate in a whole new setting, on top of not being in school for almost 2 years, and then to add salt to injury, having to wear this mask, right? and their hormones are flying. And so, we want to make sure that as you get calls from administrators about your child operating in a not safe way or not having conversations,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, we're in a pandemic. You can use that word like any and every time. We are in a pandemic. Let's really think about the undercurrent of what's really happening, and transition, is important. The other piece that I wanted to
Let me just say something about that though, because
yeah.
that is really important. That is like so critical because ninth grade, the transition from middle school to high school is hard anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we start losing kids. That's when dropout rates start really upticking. And so they're already pre-pandemic, there were programs in place to help that transition because it's a tough transition.
Mm-hmm.
My goddaughter actually is the dean of students at a pretty large public high school here in DC for the ninth grade.
Right.
And she said it's tough. I mean, it's kids are having a really tough time. And as a parent, I think we need to again, recognize that what was a difficult situation is now just like so it's magnified almost tenfold.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be even harder. And we need to work with schools to, if they don't already have systems in place to help students, extra assistance. And there, you can tell schools there's money to help do this.
Right. Remind them,
remind them your school system got a lot of money to do this.
Right.
So be an advocate in that way. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of money out there to do this. So be an advocate. And if you have to be the one to, jump up and down and scream and shout about what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. Don't think that just because they're in the school system, they know everything and they have it all figured out, because they don't. They've not done this before.
None of us have.
None, right. And so be that advocate. Research what programs may be available. We've all got to go just that extra step,
right,
to try to support our young people, because we are in unprecedented times. I know I keep saying that.
Yeah. And we don't,
but it's real.
We, the moral compass is really the base and the foundation of being tested right now and where we are. But I also wanted to speak to those who are homeschooling. I mean, we talked about schooling at home versus homeschooling, but this is probably the first time for those who are schooling at home who've made that choice because of underlying health issues or just not ready to go back into the academic world, whether it's elementary through college that you've chosen to do online, or the student has decided to do online.
Chosen, right.
And that is a choice,
it should be a choice.
Should be a choice, right? As parents, we want to dictate, even in elementary, if they're like feeling apprehensive about going in or not wanting to wear the mask, you might need to consider being online. But with that said,
let me just add one caveat to that. I believe that, but I also know everybody can't do that.
Right.
And so, people have to work. They have other reasons why they can't school at home. So I just want to say that I recognize that that's not an option. But right. If you can rearrange your life, and some of these things, we might have to make sacrifices for. If you can rearrange your life and that's what your kid needs, please do it.
Yeah, because it actually is an act of love.
Absolutely.
Of being courageous. It's uncomfortable. It's unprecedented in this time. We used to hear periodically people say, "Oh, I quit my job because I need to take care of my family member, spouse, partner,
right.
Whatever." But now, you're home, right? And you can redirect it. It is challenging. It's unnerving, but it's necessary. But those of you who are homeschooling at home, or schooling at home, it's the first time you've probably been together since the child was an infant or a toddler. And so you have to start
24/7, together
right.
24/7.
You got to have some meetings, right? You got to like, how are we going to do this? Like, and check-ins on a weekly, sometimes a daily, sometimes an hourly basis, you know, and how do
And
we,
get in support groups of other people doing the
people who are
same
doing that,
thing.
right? And
Yeah.
so my personality, I'm really not a person of scheduling. I don't, but I have a routine. When I was
Right,
homeschooling,
right,
it was just like, just make sure the bed is done today, right?
right,
Brush your teeth today,
right.
their dad did not agree with that at all. And so we had to find a couple times. So a routine, let's have a routine, not a schedule. I'm just not a schedule kind of person.
Well, routines are wonderful. And
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's a difference between a routine and a schedule.
Right. I had to learn that. I think you told me that.
Yeah, there's a difference because I am, my homeschool
Yeah.
journey, I was like all over the place. And, my child craved routine, but he hated schedules.
Right.
And so I had to figure that out. And like you said, it's like, okay, well, math is on Tuesday, and that's when it is. Like it could be at 6:30 in the morning, it could be at 10 o'clock that night, but
Right.
math is on Tuesday.
Right.
And just had to go with that flow. And then sometimes math got bumped because he wanted to play in water all day, and that was okay too.
And that's okay too. Reading time. How do you read? It could be audio, it could be a book, it could be a comic book, it could be a newspaper. It's just something, right? And so when you're doing this routine, like how do we work? This is the time to share, right? And include the child in it.
Absolutely.
A 2-year-old I got a 25-year-old. I just told him earlier, I'm doing a Zoom. I don't need you knocking on my door coming in. Just give. Sometimes it's a platform of, okay, here we go for the whole time. Screen time. Woo! Screen time. That's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother
that's a whole nother
webinar.
Webinar. That's a whole nother webinar. All I'm going to say about screen time is it's not the enemy, but it's not the solution.
Correct.
I know that's not saying much, but the other thing I want to say about that is pay attention. Don't let your child go onto screens without your knowledge and without you paying attention to what they're doing on their screens, because safety on screens is so important. And we've got, safety in all mental health, physical safety, all of that is really important. So we need a whole nother conversation about whole nother conversation. I do want to talk about safety though, because
let's roll into that.
Yes, safety, not only, safety in terms of COVID, because that is a safety feature we have to, that's probably at the front of our minds, and we need to think about because of the pandemic, how to keep our kids safe and how to keep each other safe, because kids can't be vaccinated, those under 12. And so it is difficult, for people to sit around in masks all day. But what I have learned is the really young ones, they don't care. They forget they have the mask on. They're so free. They are just free, and all they care about is creating and being free. And so they don't care about the mask. If adults didn't make so much big deal about the mask, nobody would care about the mask.
Absolutely. I was in high school the other day, and everybody was obedient. They were walking.
Yeah.
They were still touching each other. They weren't really social distancing, but they all had their masks
on.
But
they had their masks on, right?
At the sanitation, at the hand sanitizer, and they did what they were supposed to do. And so I was like, wow, this is really pretty cool,
So that's one piece of safety. The other piece of safety, which I know here in DC has become a big problem, is safety in getting, particularly in big cities, I think, getting to school and from school. And so we don't have the big yellow buses that takes kids to school. Kids walk to school, they take public transportation. And there's been an uptick in issues, particularly among adolescents, trying to harm each other to and from school.
Right.
And so we are actually in DC trying to pass legislation called Safe Passage to put some teeth into programs that make sure, excuse me, programs that make sure kids get to and from school safely. So if you haven't been in school for 18 months, one, you've got, as an adolescent, there's a whole lot of stuff pent up. Mm-hmm. And if you aren't getting along with certain groups of people, say neighborhood groups, and then you are all of a sudden thrown back into school buildings with these folks without any intervention, there can be some problems. Right. We've had some major sad issues. The other thing is that this pandemic has exposed, our tendencies as humans, or I think towards violence. And there's been an uptick because everybody is so stressed out, and they are not resolving conflicts in a nonviolent way. And so I think we really, as a society, have to help people do that. And the schools are a perfect place, I think, to do that. Again, as parents, if we don't see it happening in our school, then we need to try to make it happen. We need to be the ones to advocate for something like that to happen. I want to talk a bit about academics, because you know how academics.
Man,
so
you know what I say. Let it all
go. Let it go. You know, Frozen, that song kids love, let it go, let it go, let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go. So everybody's concerned about, what kids have lost. They've lost a year. They haven't lost anything.
They haven't lost. They actually have gained, in my mind, character, compassion.
Well, academically, because they're all at the same place. Like we all stopped at the same time. And for the most part, we're all going back at the same time. And so they're not behind. Behind what?
The 8 ball.
Right.
and I don't want to dismiss that there are learning challenges. There are people
absolutely
who have disabilities that don't allow them to process and reason in a particular way that would allow them to go, or those who are already having some issues academically. But at the core of it, if we really look at the core of academic requirements, look, colleges and universities said we don't want SAT scores. Forget it. They didn't want to. And so now some schools have said we'll never return back to it. So the pressure of this notion of what's expected of us, right? Let's just look at it from a whole perspective. Elementary school is a time for you really to build a foundation of how one learns, right? Let's look.
And we know for the youngest that they learn best by play.
By play.
And that goes up to, that can extend a pretty long way in their development.
Absolutely.
They can play all day and learn so much.
All kinds of things. And
learns
then in
everything.
middle school, you're questioning. Why?
Yes.
Developing your logic and reasoning skills. But if we shut that down, asking all these questions, let's encourage the questions, right? And
absolutely.
ask them to go and research. That's learning. Right. High school, how are you, rhetoric. How are you able to respond? How are you able to write? Using the foundation of elementary, allowing them to play and enjoy. The pandemic has allowed that, right? And so we say to ourselves, well, school has been the haven to do that. And now that they're at home, there's danger sometimes at home. And the teachers are really having concerns of what home looks like. So then we have to find other ways of connection. And I don't know if you have any ideas, recommendations, and then I want us to open it up to questions, from everybody else.
Yeah. What was your question again?
How do we let it go with confidence that they're going to be all right? All that.
Well, all that to say that first of all, it involves trusting yourself as a parent and trusting your child. And that's hard. That requires a lot of self-reflection. That requires a lot of work. What we do, and the reason we do what we do to push our kids to have certain expectations of our children is all based in fear.
Oh, say it again.
And so we fear that if they don't pass second grade, or if they aren't moved to third grade, if they don't get all A's in junior high school, or I'll play a scenario out for you. So fears that I know run through parents' heads. If they don't do great in high school, they won't be able to go to college. They won't be able to get a job. They won't be able to take care of themselves. And so it's all rooted in fear. So from elementary school, if they don't do good in elementary, they can't go to do well in middle school, which means they can't do well in high school, which means they can't do well in college. First of all, let's just stop, because there's not only one way to get to the end point of taking care of yourself, which is what we really all want for our children. We want them to be productive citizens that can take care of themselves. And so we have to let go of that fear. And what fear creates is control. We want to try to control the outcome because we're afraid that if we don't, then that outcome won't happen.
Absolutely.
And so we have to realize that there's, like I said, more than one way to get there. And so don't be afraid, particularly if you're talking about your older students, don't be afraid to let them fail. I remember
it's an option.
It's an option. It's a real option.
It's a necessary option.
And when they're younger, let them fail, and let them fail often in the security of your embrace. Because if they don't, then when they get older, and they will fail, people fail. Like, things don't go the way you want them to go. If you consider that a failure, then that's, you didn't reach whatever goal you wanted. That's an option not to reach that goal.
Right. My middle son is a scholar athlete, and the greatest losses were the greatest wins, because
Absolutely.
That was he was able to see and practice. My heart was ridden, like, oh my God, I can't believe I really wanted you to win. And then I was just like, oh, wait. But he's learning, right? And so, but I also saw how he was losing, right? The fit of rage, the sleeping, whatever. And I was like, oh, come on. But, resiliency is critical. And I think because, as you said, we love with fear and we just want the best, we forget to allow those things to be shown. As I was told by one of my sons, he was trying to figure out the good of the positive and the good of the negative. I said, what do you mean good of the negative? The good of the negative. He's just trying to find a balance. And I was like, oh,
right.
What a nugget.
Yeah, I like that. The good of the negative.
You know who said that, right?
I know who said that.
And so, the other piece is we just got to give ourselves grace, right? At the end of the day, we got to give ourselves grace. Boredom is an option. The pandemic has allowed us to be forced to be contained in 4 walls, 8 walls, upstairs, downstairs. It's an option. Reading can be cool, should be cool. However you read is fine with me. If you can't teach a subject, it is okay. Google is an option, but then also Khan. And then there's also a friend. There's so many things that I didn't know. I picked up the phone and said, hey, can you do this? And at the end of the day, we all have choices, right? And also, how do we communicate with each other? If you are really angry and upset about something, be angry and upset. Don't sit in it too long. I call your girl. I call Cydne all the time. Oh,
right. Or practice some mindfulness. Literally, just do some what I call simple mindfulness. Simple mindfulness. Just take a deep breath, or take 10 deep breaths, which is what I like to do, before I decide to act on something or react. And so, anyway, I think we've talked enough. Maybe
Yeah, we have. We have. And there was something in the chat that, yeah, we are mothers of Black boys, and failure is hard. But if we don't
absolutely.
create those safe and brave spaces that they can be human, because they have to fail and they should fail and they should learn from that failure, when they go out, their reactions and also responses are going to gravitate even more of the negative. But if they are firm and home to know, like I have a son that is bipolar and he's gone through all kinds of stuff, right? But we don't make him wrong for it. If he roars, he roars. His auntie Cydne has called him on many occasions or intervened, but we have to allow the natural ways of being a human being a human, in order for it to happen. So yes, again, the most important piece is that how do we love without that fear? And that's us as adults, because the kids get it. We just need to.
And the fear is real. I just want to say that we get it. We do get it. What's in the chat, they do have they have so much stacked against them. I'll be the first to say you are 100% right, including expectations of failure. And so maybe it's incumbent upon us, Sharon, to even define what we mean by failure,
Right.
because yeah, society expects them to fail. I get that. And we are focused on helping them succeed. But I think it's our approach and how we help them succeed that actually impedes their success.
Right.
So our idea is to, mandate all A's, mandate, you do this activity, all these mandates. And I assure you that if your sons want to be excellent, they will allow them to do the things that they want to do. Give them choices. A way to get around some of that is to give them choices. Don't say you have to play basketball. Give them choices of their activities. Okay, you can choose one activity. What will it be?
Absolutely.
And so, but that's a good point that we are, and again, this is based in fear. We're so afraid that society will, and we know society will kick them, beat them, keep their feet on their necks, keep them down, and hope they fail. But if we allow them to be humans like everyone else in our spaces, and within our realm, and that includes failing, if you will, not accomplishing something that you wanted to accomplish.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. The other piece is failure. It might, like you said, it might be just that they didn't achieve that goal at that time.
At that time, right.
They're going to, because they were able to let it loose in the home or in the library or whatever safe space that you've created, that they can release that. But if they can't feel those emotions of what it means to not get what they've said they wanted to, and then they got to go out in the world and have the other piece about the imposter syndrome. Oh, I'm looking this way.
Absolutely.
It's problematic. And then how we present, how important is that? The pandemic has stripped all of that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Cydne and I, we go back and forth, but on how we present, I'm just real time, real talk. So I look really nice. I got the makeup on, bald head. I mean, do you know I was 2 points away from being hospitalized because my blood pressure? Not today, but 2 days ago, right? But I look great, right? But if I don't sit back and take care, that's a failure that I'm not acknowledging. And so what I'm saying to us is what's important, right? And so how we build up and breathe into our Black boys who become Black men. Oh, don't get me started about the womb energy, people. you know, because we are the mothers, right? And so we are dictating at a certain time, but we have to let it go, and let it go in love. And so I'm going to stop because at 10:37, I know there might be some questions. Uh,
Yes, this is
yes,
wonderful. Thank you so much, so much, so much, so much to unpack here, right?
It
So,
is. It is. That's why we
so
talk. That's why we talk every day. We talk every day because
yes,
we're always
yes.
unpacking stuff every day.
So as I'm like looking in the chat and I'm looking, you know, on the live chat in terms
Mhm.
of that particular word fail that you all have used. And I know that this is a question that probably a lot of moms are saying, like, how do you reconcile with that, right? Because I know, like, we have here where the Pelcher's even saying we don't have room to fail, and one mistake could have permanent consequences, right? And when you think about the fact of a mom of a black son, right? When I think
Sure.
about my child, I even put into the Facebook chat that it's his freshman year. And because he has not been in school for the past 2 years, we had a very, very frank conversation because he could not stand going to school online. He hated it. He didn't do
Mm-hmm.
well. He struggled seventh and eighth grade. I was worried to death, like, what's going on? Because your grades are awful, and I know this does not reflect how smart you are. And he got to freshman year, like, oh, I got this. I'm doing, he's showing up in ways that I didn't. I'm so wonderfully grateful that he's showing up.
Yes.
In an honors history class, he's loving sign language, American Sign Language, and
Right.
and one of the things that we talked about was these are your last 4 years. You know, these are your last 4 years of literally childhood.
I want you to change that communication.
Yes, yes. We definitely unpack it more,
Not
right?
last 4 years.
Well, these are your very, very important years that you need to, focus, and and there's so much going on in that high school because he goes to a high school with 3,000 kids,
Right.
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
he's never been to school this large. And literally, I
Uh-huh.
was telling
Sure.
DePelcher yesterday that sometimes I think every day he comes home telling me a new story, and I feel like he's just sitting there in the school with a bag of popcorn, just watching all the drama
Well,
unfold.
he probably is. Yeah, he probably is because it is a lot of drama in high school, period. And then when you
Right,
get that
but
many people of the same age together,
right.
oh, it is a
So
show.
so I'm
Absolutely.
so I'm just trying to, like, as we unpack this thing of failure and how we can, you know, really, really think about how can we allow that to happen, because we don't. We're always trying to pick up the pieces and make sure they don't fail, and trying to make sure we're putting things in place so that they can, do what
Yep.
they need to do not to fail. So how can we reconcile with that? That's a great question that DePelsha posed.
It's I'm not gonna act like it's an easy thing to do. Um, it's very difficult. It's painful actually, uh, to know that your child may not do the things. And again, it's back to expectations. These are the things that we expect of them. Um, I
Mm,
guarantee, I believe that if they're doing the things they expect and they don't succeed at it the first time, they'll just keep trying. They don't even see that as a failure. But
correct.
if we put in front of them the things that we want them to do and that we expect, if they don't want to do that, then they could just check out. And we may see that as a failure. And, we could debate about which terms we use. I know words are very important. I'm not one to believe that words don't matter because I think words do matter. But the point of it is that what society sees as a failure, I think we can allow our children to experience. We can allow them to experience not reaching whatever goals we set for them or they set for themselves, because that creates growth. I remember hearing many, many years ago, which is how I began to believe in this notion of failure is necessary. Percy Sutton, who many of you may or may not know who that is, um, great businessman, super successful, said for every success he had, there were 5 failures. And I was like, wow, if a person like that, a Black man, is admitting that he has failed that many times, because he had a lot of successes. And so if he says for every success, there are 5 failures, I thought, wow, there's something to that. And we have to stop making our children believe that the only option is to be superhuman, is to be so much greater than. And I know that we tell our Black children that because society has made it such that they have to be more than. But I think that is so detrimental.
It is.
To them. And so I think we have to, it's too much pressure. It's way too much. So we've got to, go ahead.
We're the ones that can take the pressure cooker off as mothers, right? And I'm serious about the women, right? The role that we play in these Black boys' lives. So failure starts at age 2 when the temper tantrum comes, right? And there's and they're out of control. Then failure happens again when they're not my friend, right? And so we're looking at these different things, and the term failures is more of it's not going my way. It's not happening in the time frame that I want it to have. And so how are we as moms communicating to them that it's okay, or why are you feeling this way, and what's another way for it to happen, right? And so when we are communicating to them, no, you should, or yes, you should, you're not allowing them the opportunity to creatively, logically, analytically figure it out for themselves, right? Oh, okay, get up. You know, as I told you, my son is a scholar athlete, and when he didn't make the team, you know, I'm crying with him. Don't cry with him, and let him cry and say, how can I be there for you? And don't put a timeline on it. That starts there. Now, when you get to high school and you said, you know, these are the most important 4 years, every time it's a new journey, right?
A huge journey and a wonderful journey.
Right. And so
and
now
a wonderful journey.
So now we have to say to ourselves, how are we using our words? Because you get straight A's. You graduate valedictorian school and then fail out of college.
Right.
Or you are the reverse. B's all throughout high school.
Right.
And then you go
to a college. Right. And you know, the notion that, you know, my kid did so terrible and they won't go to college. It's been my experience.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
Right. And what that means, though, from many of the people that I encounter professionally and personally, it means my kid won't go to exclusive college. My kid won't go to the highly competitive college. Because unless your kid, and this, you know, unless your kid doesn't graduate, and then that's a whole nother thing because they can still get to college if that is the goal. Everybody doesn't go to college. Everybody doesn't need to go to college. But they can still get to college. So your child has all C's, they graduate from high school. That doesn't mean they can't go to college. And that doesn't mean they won't do well in college.
Everybody has a different path.
Absolutely.
And we
need to honor that. Absolutely.
That's what the failure discussion is about. Honoring the path in its process and really managing our expectations as mothers through that, and that we're not projecting our stuff. And it's not easy. I project all day, every day. But
we both do.
When you check yourself and say,
you're intentional about trying to walk this path, and you have to be intentional every second. And you still come up short sometimes.
Right. And we want our kids and we want our kids to be able to navigate those things too and make good decisions in that, right?
And if we're constantly making the decision for them,
it becomes
they can't make that decision.
They can't navigate
for themselves.
Because I think, like, even because I work a lot of times with parents as well, and we have discussions around, them trying to prop their kids or move their kids around and make them like how a mini me. I think somebody put that in the chat as well. Right. And I found letting your kids be who they are and just honoring who they are, they're going to be phenomenal anyway, right?
That can be challenging to who you are, because a lot of times what happens is they don't show up the way you want them to, and you can really be mad about it. Or they could show up in a particular way with a dis-ease, a mental disorder, a physical challenge, or defiancy, and you're angry about it. And so you have to say to yourself, why am I showing up like this when they seem to be in their authentic self? And that's also a serious question that one asks. Ego is a serious thing.
Yes, it is.
When it comes to
some people call it edging God out.
Edging God out. So as a mother, right, we think that we're all being all knowing because of what we've done. But if you just take out that I'm a human being and this is another human being,
and this is another human being, right? That's the thing. This is another human being that has their own. That's why I say they're not your mini me. They have their own expectations. They have their own goals and wishes. And so we have to kind of get out of the way. We have to guide them and support them, but not guide them and support them to what we want to do. And what we see it if our child doesn't do what we think they should be doing, we see it as a failure on our part.
Not their part.
Not their part, on our part. And that is so, and if we see it as a failure on our part, sometimes we then transpose that, put that on them. Then it becomes a failure on your part because you didn't do what I thought you should do.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to say that one piece is also when they are making choices, and this is more so for high school and college and young adults, when they're making choices in life and you know that choice is about to take them to a whole nother level of destruction or problems, sometimes you have to say, well, I'm not going to be a part of that, right?
Right.
And that's hard, right? To watch your child go through that. But you don't stop loving them. Because the love is what really puts them through. I have a family friend who their son made a bad decision and got incarcerated for 5 years. His parents called him every day, sent him letters all the time. The choice that he made, that was the consequence, but they did not stop loving him. When he got out, they met him. And they made sure that he was supported through the process. So when we look at failure on so many different levels, right? Because they can be some grave situations that can come about. I'm not, but we also have to honor that we still love them. And that love is what will persevere through them. They will say, you know what? I made a really bad decision and the consequences were grave. But the one thing I know is that I was still loved no matter what.
Yeah.
Well, and as parents, we can't just start helping them make good decisions when they get to high school.
We got to help them very young.
Absolutely. Very, very young. We have to help them start making those good decisions so that, and we need to do it consistently such that when they get to high school or young adulthood, they have that ingrained. That doesn't mean that they're not going to make a good decision all the time. I mean, we all make silly mistakes. We all make some big mistakes, but if they have that foundation, then it is just that, a mistake. And so anyway,
one mom here said, good judgment comes from wisdom, and wisdom comes from bad judgment. Need to have those experiences for sure.
That's what we agree.
Yes.
Oh, Depelsha, how did we decide to homeschool? What are the biggest benefits and challenges?
Mine was health challenges. My son was near death. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And so I was like, well, let's homeschool. And I started enjoying it. There's a challenge every day. I got up. Some days I didn't want to homeschool. I actually went on strike for 3 months and their dad had to homeschool. So I had all kinds of challenges. I didn't feel like feeding them. I didn't want to do it. I forgot the homonyms. I mean, it was all kinds of stuff that just real time, real talk. But the benefits outweighed the challenges. And the benefits is that I really got to horn in on the things that I felt was important. So while they needed to know the verbs and the nouns and the pronouns, I was more important on character. That was just what I did. And so what I recommend is that what's important to you? What do you want to pour into your children? It could be athletics. It could be
Yeah,
IT,
it could be,
whatever.
yeah, like
You
the
know?
reason I joke and say Sharon, made me homeschool, but it wasn't quite that simple. And one of the reasons we did it was because our son danced, and he was a performer, and he started being a performer at a very young age. And that just didn't bode well with having to get up at, 7 o'clock every morning and go to school after you just come off of a 2-week show run. And so we decided, we'll homeschool him. The other thing is, I was driving home when he was an infant. I was working, my husband was home with our son. I was driving home past the Capitol and looked down toward the monument and thought, oh my goodness, the world is a classroom. Why do I want my little one to sit inside all day and miss all of this? Mm-hmm. And so I thought we may be able to homeschool. And as time went on, again, it was then pushed further by the fact that we wanted to nurture what his love was. And at that time, it was dance and performing. And so we decided to homeschool. Were there challenges? Heck yeah. I have an only child. So I was the playmate, the teacher. I was the everything. And, some days I loved it, overall, I loved it. But some days I just wanted to stay in bed with the covers pulled up. And that was real. And so that's why, it was great to be part of support groups and other homeschool groups, have a support system like Sharon to call and say, hey, I just don't know if I can do this today. And have a cheerleader say, yes, you can do it. If nothing else, just read to him all day. If nothing else, let him play in water all day. If nothing else, go take a walk in the park and you'll feel better. So,
were you a part of any national homeschool associations or citywide or statewide, so that parents know if there's any resources out there for them?
There are tons of resources. Like Sharon said, Google is our friend. And so if you Google homeschool resources in whatever state you're in, whatever city you're in, you'll come up with a lot. Go to Facebook, there are homeschool resources. When we started homeschooling, there were fewer. Sharon's oldest is 25 and her youngest is 19, and my son is 19. Her youngest and my son are actually like 5 days apart in birthdays. And so there was not a lot. I mean, we had to do a lot of that creating our own. Right. But right now, there's a lot.
There's a lot. And the other piece is that the reason why we don't want to give resources out, each state has their own requirements of what is required. I love those who are in California. I almost moved to California because, there were a lot of opportunities allowed for it. But what I will say is again, schooling at home and homeschooling are different. Online courses, allowing your child to sit in front of a computer all day is the same thing that you're trying to avoid from being at home. Homeschooling is for every family. Every family is not ready to do homeschooling. And so what I want to ask you all first and foremost is create a mission and vision of what you want to see for your family and identify if you all are really ready to take the sacrifices and be okay with saying, no, I don't want to, or yes, I want to. How do you create a decision?
We have another question.
I love it.
About that.
Yes. How do you create a decision matrix for a 16-year-old? For example, if they're deciding whether to go to an indoor concert, how do you walk them through good decision making?
That's an excellent question. Excellent question. Sharon, you want to tackle that a little first?
The first thing I would say is, so there's a pizza pie, right? And this is what I say, that a student at age 0 gets no decision on the quadrants of the pizza. By 16, they should have about 60% or maybe 50%, depending on the maturity.
They might have more than that too.
Yeah, they might have, because the goal is that by 18, they should have the whole pizza pie, right? So then there's the moral compass. That's one of my sons calling now. Look at that. There's the moral compass is one part of the quadrant. Good decision making, bad decision making, choices and consequences around that. Pain is an option, whether it's discipline, right? It's going to be painful, or regret. And then if you're having those conversations by 16, then they might say to you, you know what? I really want to go to this concert, but I know I shouldn't. And I just wanted to talk to you about it. And then you
Right. I was going to say, in a practical sense, what you can do is to literally just have consequences and benefits, and sort of like a what do you call it, a consequence and benefits analysis. So you write down, what are the benefits of going to this concert, the pros and cons. So what are the pros and what are the cons, and you just list them literally, either on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper. Whiteboards are my friend. I put everything on whiteboards. I find it very helpful when raising children, because they can see things really easily. And so you just write it out and ask, your 16-year-old at this point, like Sharon said, hopefully they've developed some decision-making skills. They may not be perfected at this point. They may not be as strong as you think they should be, but they should have developed some. And so you ask them, after they've gone down the list, like if I go to the concert, the pros: be with my friends, enjoy music, whatever they think, are some of the pros. The cons, could be exposed to COVID, could bring COVID to my home. So-and-so could get severely ill. So-and-so could be hospitalized. I could be hospitalized. I mean, you do the juxtaposition of the pros and the cons and have them make that decision. I still use that decision making for my 19-year-old.
Right. I was going to say, it's a practice. It's something that you do.
Absolutely.
Eventually, they will practice.
They will internalize that. Yes.
And do it. So take the time now to do it now, and not at 16. Start it young. Developmentally appropriate, using the words that they can from age 5, right? And then their reasoning skills get better. Now, does that develop a precocious child?
Yes, it does.
It does.
It can. I mean, but precocious doesn't mean it's bad. Right. It develops a child that can question. It develops a child that will push back on some of the decisions that you make. But all of those are good things, because remember, your child's not going to be a little child for always. Right. And so you want them to exhibit those same behaviors when they go out into the world. You want them to question what's happening to them and to others. You want them to be able to make decisions about situations, whether it's safe or not. And so you have to let them practice from when they're very young when they're at home.
Which is why pros and cons is a great way to get kids to start thinking about what can happen, and why they want things to happen, and how things can go awry. The pros and cons is a way that I actually work with my children as well. I always have pros and cons lists, and even my 29-year-old to this day makes pros and cons lists.
Absolutely.
He's making choices, because we've done it since he was very little.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely. Right.
Thank you. All right.
Sure.
So I know that we're starting to wrap up. We've come up on 11 o'clock. Hey, DePelsha.
Yes, I just wanted to come back on just to say thank you all so much for this conversation and for sharing your wealth of information. We've had an active chat. You can't see Facebook. We have a very active person from the UK this morning, actually.
Oh, awesome. Welcome.
Commenting. So we look forward to continuing this conversation and continuing a relationship with you all. I'm sure we have many moms who could benefit from your knowledge and, professional services. So thank you so much for all of this. We're going to get through it together. We're figuring it out real time. We don't know what this school year is going to bring. I mean, I'm optimistic. Right. My kids returned to school this past week. It was the first. New York is one of the last states to go back. So our first week of school was this past week. So I'm fresh in it. Been getting up at 5:30 a.m. all week, which is painful. But I would rather do that than be a homeschooler. I just have to say, go to school.
I'm
That
with
is,
you.
yeah, hey.
I'll get up at 5:30, whatever time I need to get these kids to get out of here and go to school. So I'm praying for a good year for them and for all of our children. So we just want to thank you so much, and hope you will be available if we call on you again, because we may need some more guidance.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for inviting us. We've
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. Yeah, we've really enjoyed it. And yeah, we'd love to come back and tackle some other topics.
Okay, wonderful.
Have
Any
a wonderful,
final
wonderful
remarks
day.
you want to share?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to say that at the end of the day, just give each and every one of you, give yourself grace. We don't know what we're doing. We wake up one morning and it could be just something, turn the world upside down again. And so every step of the day, just breathe, be
Yep.
mindful of the importance of your breath and meditating, exercise, and walking away if necessary, and give yourself grace.
Yeah. Hug yourself and your children often.
That is a good point to end on, because next month, I believe it's October 10th, is World Mental Health Day. So our next session will be focused on that in some capacity. We'll announce it soon. We always focus on mental health in May, but we're going to also take a moment, given all that's going on in the world, to do so in October this year. So stay tuned for more on that.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much, ladies. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And we will
have
see
a good
you again
weekend.
next month.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.